are so happy today to have our friend and fellow traveler here, Bill Winkler, as our speaker. I've known Bill for many, many years, and he's always made me feel welcome, and he's always had a delightful sense of humor. He's been interested in the metaphysical world for as long as I've known him, and many years before that. He helped Pueblo get started with a holistic health fair, and that has since been handed on to others, and it's become an extremely successful and beautiful event 2 times a year in Pueblo. He's also been a part of contactees support groups, I believe, Bill, UFO kind of support groups, so people could have a place to talk and share ideas and information. So he's been all over the place. We love Bill so much, and we're so glad that he wants to be with us today and share his amazing history and stories and information. And I think he asked that everybody who does have a cell phone or a smartphone or iPhone to have that with you, because that's part of his presentation today. So without further ado, thank you so much, Bill. We welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Marcia Beachy, our effervescent and esoteric Zoom hostess, working in conjunction with Einar, our astute Zoom master, and helping him along the way is Angelina Perez, Queen of Zoom.
She is.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have here in my hand a silver dollar, which is tangible, because for the first time in 30 years, am I doing UFO presentations? I now have evidence I can share with you. This evidence came forth last year and also approximately 3 or 4 weeks ago, which I will share with you shortly. This is tangible. The evidence is tangible. This silver coin also represents approximately 3,000 years of culture, of civilizations that matured from the bartering system and began to develop their coins. They eventually developed commemorative coins to commemorate a Julius Caesar, perhaps a president, a queen, or a prime minister, or even perhaps an important war that they were triumphant. Now, I fast forward you folks to the year 2019, last year. Last year, the Canadian government authorized the Canadian Royal Mint to produce 4,000 UFO coins. I'll repeat that, 4,000 UFO coins that went up for sale last June at the price of $129.95. However, this commemorates a UFO crash in Canada. Now, those of you with your smartphones, I would like to have you repeat what I'm suggesting to you, dictating to, I should say, and those who have pen and paper, please write this down for your future research or search, and that is this. October 4, 1967, UFO crash, Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia. I'll repeat that a little differently now because I did it wrong. It should be UFO crash, October 4, 1967, Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia. And I ask you to do that because I'd like to have the people start thinking about obliterating 90%, 80% of a word. And that word is a most respectful word. It is the word research. Today, we do a mere search, a mere tapping on our computers or talking to our cell phone or our iPhone. And we get the information that is required. Now, what occurred back in 1967? In a small fishing village in Nova Scotia, just before sunset, it was still light out, the citizens there, the residents there in that fishing village thought there was a plane hurtling down through the air, and it crashed in the shallow, but very shallow waters of Shag Harbor. They immediately jumped into their boats and their motorboats. They didn't have far to go because this craft was approximately 300 yards away from the shoreline. When they got there, they were astounded. There were no people crying, screaming for help. There was no debris either, which was quite astounding. And within a short period of time, an hour or so, the search was called off because it was too dark. The next day, the Canadian Navy sent a boat down there with divers. They found nothing, despite the fact that the citizens of that hamlet, that fishing village, said, no, this is where this airplane crashed. They thought it was an airplane. As a consequence, the Canadian Navy was alerted, and so was the United States Navy, because this is something highly unusual, obviously. And they parked outside of the harbor, miles and miles away, to determine what was going on. Within a day or two, they discovered with their sonar that this, I will now say UFO, but in reality, in the world of, in the lexicon of ufology, it is now known as a USO, underwater submersible object, a common phrase with us people involved in this studying. They discovered that it had moved approximately 20 miles away from where it crashed. Outside of the realm of the circle of the ships outside this harbor, out in the ocean still, was a Russian vessel that was out there, obviously eavesdropping as to the radio communications that were going on. Now, at this time, the Cold War had been in force for a good 10 years already, in the early 1960s. Unbeknownst to all of us, including little old me, because I just discovered this only in the past several weeks doing my research, we had set up, and I'd like to ask, okay, I'm getting caught up here in my thoughts. Angelina, please put up slide number 1. And here we have sound surveillance undersea net. I'll pronounce it SOSUS net. This was placed around the world under all the oceans, including the Indian Ocean, to detect Russian submarines. Russian submarines travel at 45 miles per hour. American submarines travel approximately 35 miles an hour. The military code name for that was Fast Mover. Now, while they were setting up this line of ships outside the harbor to find out what's going on with this craft under the water there, 20 miles away from where it crashed, suddenly they discovered, because of SOSUS net, there was now under the water coming at who knows what speed at that time, 100, 200 miles an hour, it could have been 50 miles an hour, a second USO, underwater submersible object. They came and nestled right next to the one that was under the water that had crashed earlier. Now, the two of them stayed there for about 2 days. Our divers went down to determine what was going on. They couldn't ascertain anything except that there were two unusually shaped craft under the water. This saga went on for approximately 6, perhaps 7 days. By the 6th day, shall we say, both of those two USOs began to move. And they moved out into the ocean. And they moved at considerable speed, and then they broke surface of the water and they flew off to space. This is information that I got from what is known as open source. In the military intelligence in America or other nations, they all have their agents who do open source investigations. Open source merely is getting information from newspapers, magazines, TV, radio, and of course nowadays, internet. Because this is being allowed in open source, the American public and the world is being slowly but surely, but much faster than ever before, being conditioned to the fact that we are not alone. Because this was on internet in considerable detail. And now the sale of 4,000 UFO coins, I'm sure, brought about considerable excitement and publicity in Canada at that time. Now, let me go to also the year 2019 of evidence of UFOs. I now call upon Angelina to please bring up slide number 1-A. And here you'll be reading about ATIP. ATIP is Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Military code name, Fast Walker. Now, I and others as myself in UFO research are quite familiar with Fast Walker for the past, who knows what, 10, 12, 15 years. I must admit, Fast Mover is brand new to me. I just learned about that only in the past 2 months or so. Why? Because it was on the internet. It was available to the public in an open source fashion. And in this way, the United States government is going to continue what is known and in lexicon of, excuse me, the United States government will continue a little bit faster with their drip, drip, drip education of the public. This is a term that's used by us UFO researchers. It's slowly but surely conditioning the American public and others to the fact that we are not alone, either up in the sky or now we're learning in the depths of our ocean. So, what occurred last July and August on television, on mass media, on the news, was a filming of a Navy cockpit fighter jet behind the head of a pilot. And in front of the pilot on his control panel was a screen, I would say 8 inches by 8 inches. In that screen was what he was tracking. He was tracking that we know of as the UFO. But the terminology in that specific instance is tic-tac. Why? Because it's shaped like a tic-tac, the ones that we're familiar with. For you folks in Hollywood, you know we have to use prompts and sound effects sometimes. But here we go. Tic-tac, tic-tac. So I was watching that with my dear wife in our living room. I was saying to myself, oh my goodness, this is being shown on mass media, news time, and we refer to it as tic-tac. And it looked like a little tic-tac zigzagging back and forth on the screen, highly erratic, and the jet was trying to catch it. I turned to my wife and I said, boring. So what else is new? For the past 10 years, I've seen this. Past 8 years, I've seen this all over YouTube. Countless cell phone videos, cameras, taking pictures of these tic-tacs. And the most astounding aspect is, which I really enjoyed, is the ones that came from South America and Central America. They didn't know the language, whether it was Portuguese or Spanish, but the fear, the excitement, the thrill, the nervous laughter was occurring just as it was when I would hear the people in America with their phones up and photographing and videotaping the tic-tac flying about very erratically. So it was nothing new to me, and that was why my reaction, although it may sound rather obnoxious, but it's reality. It was nothing new to me at all whatsoever. So now we are going a little bit further, and I have 2 names to you folks to write down. 2 senators. We know the government is highly involved in these things, obviously. And I've known for several years only that the senator from Nevada, Senator Harry Reid, has been quietly behind the scenes for 30 years, working not only with the government, but with highly classified UFO researchers. Not me, I'm just one of the local guys here, but people who have their own TV shows, people who are authors. He has consulted with them. He has gotten ideas from them. He has gotten information from them. And part of his job as a senator is to fund different organizations. And one of those was to fund the ATIP. Now, in a sense, I'm being overly dramatic here. In a sense, reduce ATIP, because ATIP was just replaced last month, August 4th, 2020. And Angelina, please bring up the next slide, which is, where am I? Slide number 2, please. No, it isn't. I beg your pardon. Okay, you want to take that off, please? I'm terribly sorry. Yeah, I apologize. I purposely do not have a slide for that. I would like to have you folks write this down, because I know writing down information sometimes really impresses you. August 4th, 2020, the Department of Defense officially made Department of Navy in charge of, and here's new terminology for you folks, you're going to have to live with this, unidentified aerial phenomenon task force. Unidentified aerial phenomenon task force, simply known as UAP. UAP is slowly but surely replacing, for the time being, UFO. Why? Well, it's far more innocuous for the press to come out and say, yes, there was a UAP situation down in a certain city, certain state, or in the ocean, rather than saying there was a UFO in that city or that state or that ocean situation. So UAP is now the new terminology to be utilized with regard to UFOs. This is being funded by a senator who is currently active, and he is from Florida, Marco Rubio, who I just discovered has become chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. This gentleman is funding UAP for their mission. Now here is the mission. The mission is precise. The mission is essentially legalistic. It is to detect, analyze, and gain insight into nature and the origins of unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, if you read my post, if you read my poetry, there is a theme that comes up quite often from the Bible. As above, so below. Well, we've got UFOs flying around, and as the public is learning, we have USOs traveling around also. Now, I would like to call upon Angelina to please, this time, bring up, once again, I did it wrong last time, but slide number 2. Slide number 2 is one of my books of poetry. My books of poetry have messaging in them. Why science fiction less? Well, you know, there's certain things that are science fiction and certain things are wrapped with some fact. So I have a penchant in playing with words, and here we have science fiction as my title. What is science fiction less? Christopher Columbus and his crew had a UFO sighting. Well, that's kind of correct. The reality was Admiral Columbus and his crew, merely hours before they discovered the New World, had a USO sighting that traveled alongside their boat for several minutes and then moved away and then broke the surface of the ocean and flew up into the sky and flew around and flew around and flew around. How do I know about this? Because as any admiral, as any captain, they make their entries into the ship's log, the captain's log or the admiral's log. And Christopher Columbus did do that. So that is what you would read in that particular book I have. Now, I do have, I don't know if I can show this, but anyhow, I have Bill Winkler, BillWinklerPoetry.com/blog. I'd like to have you go right to my blog, forget about the poetry for the time being. I'd like to have you read my posts. And one of my posts, for example, is spiritual significance of first contact landing site. And it's wonderful. I do have, because of my son Thomas, people here from Hollywood. And what has Hollywood branded in our memories for decades? And the UFO landed on the lawn of the first house, and out came an extraterrestrial. Well, what is the spiritual significance of a first contact landing site if it landed at a particular religious site? Be it the Vatican, the Wailing Wall, Mecca, or part of my humor, but Burning Man in the middle of July out in Nevada with one of their outdoor festivals. Also here, and this is astounding, this had never occurred to me in the years that I formed a UFO abductee support group in Connecticut. I chaired that for 3 years and 10 months. But only recently, because my dear wife, she was watching something on YouTube, and there was a woman. Woman was a lesbian. She was married to a lesbian. She became pregnant. She could explain how she got pregnant. Her partner divorced her. She had her child. After fashion, she learned about extraterrestrial abductions. She was regressed back to the time of when she was regressed, and lo and behold, she was an abductee. And one of the posts I wrote was lesbian abductions by extraterrestrials. And here is something quite astounding, but I'm familiar with this. Shape-shifting extraterrestrials in their shape-shifting spaceships. Tic-tac, all right, fine, tic-tac. Tic-tacs morph, tic-tacs go here and there. I have seen on YouTube 15 years at least of craft being filmed by people here and there all over the world that have a particular shape. Suddenly, they morph and become elongated, they become squarish, they split in two, and those two split in four, and they fly around and dance with each other. And that is, I think, quite difficult when you're dealing with steel and timber. But here we have shape-shifting extraterrestrials in their shape-shifting spaceships. Now, that concludes my first 15-minute segment. I hope I'm on time here, Marcia. I forgot to put my timer on. The next area you're going to go to is reincarnation. So I do wear the hat of ufologist. I do wear the hat of a metaphysical person. I'm not in the depth of being a metaphysician, but you know, I love the topic. And I'd like to take you, nice ladies and gentlemen, to India. Since I'm bringing you to India, I must greet you with Namaste. Namaste, the divine spirit within me greets the divine spirit within you. That means to me, divine, that means to me that we are immortal. As a consequence, we become incarnated and incarnated and incarnated over and over again. So what do we have in India? We have 1,200,000,000 people, approximately 850 million people believe in reincarnation. It is in their writings of this ancient, cultured, intellectual nation of 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years. They write about reincarnation. And in days of old, their writings were in the form of poetry. And they also wrote about UFOs back 2,000, 3,000 years ago, but I shan't get into that now. So, one would assume that thousands of years they have had countless past life regressions, either individually or in groups. Now, I'd like to have you leave India and come with me to when I'm 16 years old, 70 years ago. I'm living in and was born in with European parents in the Greenpoint section of Brooklyn, New York. A European conclave, so European that my first language was Hungarian. I couldn't speak English until I went to school. It's a very, very, very Catholic area. Suddenly, at this age of 15 to 16, the New York newspapers, the New York Daily News, the New York Mirror, and I believe the Herald Tribune was still around in those days. That was my favorite newspaper. Why? Because it was big and had big pictures. I'm a kid, what do I know? There was an article, there were articles upon articles upon articles for months written about a man, Maury Bernstein, who was going to be writing a book, to be called In Search of Bridie Murphy. And as Angelina, please bring up that next slide. I forgot to ask you there. That's slide number 3. In Search for Bridie Murphy. Now here is a book that had not been printed yet. I'm about 15, 16 years old in a Catholic environment, Christian environment, as the case may be in this lifetime. And this is about reincarnation. This is about an American woman who, when she's put under hypnosis, comes and speaks in an Irish brogue to the gentleman who is questioning her. I was impressed with that. I was so impressed with that, it was with me for many, many years. Not that I did much about it, because when you're young, you're growing, and you go into the army, and you're in Germany, etc., you have other things in life to contend with. But here was a woman who was now speaking in the Ireland dialect, Irish dialect, and she was giving addresses. She was giving names of churches of the 1805 era when she was born. And this is Bridie Murphy. So now, let me, once again, fast forward you nice, ladies and gentlemen, to 1996, Pueblo, Colorado. Golly, I'm here 6 months, and a new store opened up, Barnes & Noble, a handsome store. I'm working with people, a very nice lady. We're chatting about this and that, obviously in the bookstore. We worked there. And she said, oh, you're interested in reincarnation? I said, yes. She said, have you ever heard about Bridie Murphy? I says, yeah, years ago, when I was a teenager, there was a book coming out or something, I read about that. She said, well, that book was published here in Pueblo, Colorado. What? She said, Mr. Maury Bernstein was the author of that book. He's a gentleman who learned to become a hypnotist. He's the gentleman who hypnotized and regressed. Mrs. Cummings, Ruth Cummings was her name. And what popped out was Bridie Murphy. I says, holy cow, here I am, all the way from Brooklyn, New York to Pueblo, Colorado. And the book was published here. Let's go a step further about synchronicity. And what am I doing today? I am talking about reincarnation. And I'll be sharing with you shortly about some of my experiences having been regressed back to the time of whenever I was regressed to. So, I've had about 20 past life regressions, group regressions. Some I slept through. Hey, it's Saturday night, I worked hard all week long. It's a good time to fall asleep, and you do. Some of the regressions I had was scanty. I couldn't really rely too much upon it. One, 600 years ago, I discovered what it feels like. I don't want to sound too embarrassing, ladies, but I know what it feels like to be a woman, because I was a dancer in Egypt. The images were quite vivid, because it turns out my wife had just started working, a new employee came in, and they chatted for a while, and this woman who was of Jewish background, but was an Egyptologist in her own avocation. So she said, you have to meet my husband, because he had an experience. She came over, we had lunch, and I explained to her, described to her what I saw, what I felt. And she said, oh, you were in Luxor. Just like that. I said, Luxor, I've heard of it. I have no idea what it is. And she said, yeah, what you're describing, the buildings, the walls, the massive walls, the coloring of the walls, the way you were dressed, etc., you were in Luxor. Now, there is such a thing, if you're not familiar with this at all, group past life regression. We've had about a dozen in a home in Connecticut. I've had singular ones here in Colorado. One stands out. 8000 BC I went to. I was in Atlantis. I was a diplomat high priest. I was standing in a plaza. I could see a pyramid nearby, maybe a quarter of a mile away. It was what is known as a step pyramid, has a flat top. The sky was ominous. It was orange. It was slightly gray, but it was an eerie, eerie color. And now suddenly the next scene is, I'm sitting in what is known as a litter box. I'm seated in that, and I had two men in front of me, two men in the back of me, and they have these long poles attached to the box. And they pick me up, and I travel wherever I have to go. Now I see myself, out-of-body experience essentially, and I'm tall and lean, and I'm sitting in the litter box, and I lean forward, and I'm quite serious. I know I'm going to the coastline, and I say, they must listen to me. My feeling at that time, in that regression, was that warfare or a battle going on, but something ominous occurring. Another scene was a room where some people were being tortured. I won't go into that. So we come out of this. I share my experience. This person shares their person, next person. Another person, now we're on blankets and pillows, and he leans forward He leans towards me. This is New England that I'm living in. These people are quite stoic. They're reserved. This is a young man, about 28, 30 years old, comes from a wealthy farming family out there in that part of Connecticut. He leaned forward and he had the audacity to stick his hand toward me and pointed his finger at me, and he said, I too was in Atlantis 8,000 years ago. And I saw Bill Winkler there. And I know he was an important person. And I lived on the coastline. And the coastline fell into the water. And I drowned. Although it was not an upsetting experience, but I drowned. But I know Bill Winkler was there. So when you have past life regressions, it's quite possible, I don't know how often, that one or two people in that room will join up and get and catalog their information together and know that they have been together at one time. So I did have one future life progression early on in my learning process at 89 in the local high school in Rockville, Connecticut. Magnificent teacher. So in the classroom, after about 5 or 6 weeks, 2 nights a week, she had us do a future life progression. I said, oh, this is cool. Suddenly I was in South America or some Latin American country. I was barefoot. I had on tan pants, long-legged pants, and I had on when I say a white shirt, it's an off-white shirt. It's an ivory white shirt, the type that people wear there nowadays. And I was walking rather quickly through the jungle. And I was in a revolutionary situation. And I was going to the city. Got to the city, which I don't remember too much about. But suddenly I am inside of a building. Visualize, if you will, the Vatican in Rome, that huge dome building. I was there once when I was a GI. So suddenly I was in a building such as this with a huge, huge ceiling. And I know, and I had, when you have a past life regression, you also have out of body experiences. So now you see yourself. So now I'm behind myself, I see myself, and I see my hands go up to my waist. And I say, rather adamantly, aha. So this is what this place looks like. Slowly but surely, I began to rise higher and higher and higher and looked about, and I went all the way up to the top and I went to the ceiling. So now the teacher in the classroom gets us out of this future life progression. I shared my experience, and there was one gentleman there. He says, Bill, I think what happened was someone came up behind you, either shot you or stabbed you. You died instantly, and what you experienced was your soul going up to the dome, to the ceiling. I says, okay, fine. That's what happened. I'd like to go to slide number 7, please, Angelina. My slide number 7 is love, humor, and society. I'm somewhat of a poor man's sociologist. One of the poems I wrote, which is horribly redundant, is titled Dumb, Dumb, Dumb. It's obviously about our poor education system in America for the past 30 or 40 years. Now, if you do go to my website, billwinklerpoetry.com / I guess you call it blog, you'll come across some of my posts. I do have a redundancy with words in my poems or in my blogs. And one here is clones with souls and soulless clones. I'll repeat that because that's a tongue twister. Clones with souls and soulless clones. And being a humorist, one of my favorites is karma, karma on the wall. Who has the most challenging karma of all? Yay, raise your hands, guys. You have a challenging karma. And one more. Well, I did that, yeah, I did the three. So those are three posts, and that concludes the second segment. We go to the third and last segment, which I find rather fascinating, and that is time travel, time travelers. Let me just orientate myself here. Okay, so the first part is not a very happy topic to bring about, but I have to talk about World War II and Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler and his Nazi scientists were experimenting on many, many things. And he was experimenting on the ability to time travel. In addition to their superb advancements in rocketry, he and his cohorts were working on Die Glock, Glocke, the bell. This was a device, I think it was about 40, 50 feet high, about 15 feet wide. It was bell-shaped. But importantly, it also had the shape of an acorn, the nut that we eat, an acorn shape. And the purpose of that was for time travel. If you want to do research on this, just go on your computer and just type up Hitler time travel. Now let me bring you forward to 1965, the United States of America in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. On December 9, if you want to write this down, December 9, 1965, a UFO crashed in the small hamlet of Keksburg, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. It was noticeable because it was hurtling through the sky, lots of flames, lots of sparks perhaps, and it crashed in the woods. It was discovered by several of the townspeople. Remarkably, within, I think, to my best judgment, within 48 hours, the United States military was there to sanitize the area. But the people who saw this intact craft, this intact UFO, was in the shape of an acorn. If you do your research on this, you'll come across photographs of it. I've seen it. The townspeople hired someone, a sculptor and artist, to make an acorn-shaped sculpture about 25 feet high, and it sits on a platform about 10 feet high, and it sits outside the local fire station. An acorn-shaped craft? Let me take you back to India, ladies and gentlemen. The Vimana, V-I-M-A-N-N-A, the Vimana that I'm quite familiar with, has been seen by millions of people in India for thousands of years, these craft flying around. They have extensive, lengthy poems written about the Vimana fighting in the skies and crashing and cities being destroyed. They've come across that on occasion out in the middle of India, where they're now scraping the ground to make up a new shopping center. They come across an area that suddenly is cordoned off by the archaeologists. They dig down and they find that there was a town there at one time, a moderate size, but the town was filled with radioactivity. The stones that were used, the rocks that were built were fused together as though in high heat, sudden high heat. And the skeletons had radioactivity. And they looked back into the poetry of India and they discovered that eons ago, there was a royal battle going on above them among the Vimana. And the Vimana is at times described to be shaped in the form of an acorn. In India, their religious centers have the Vimana here and there. It's on their paintings. And in some areas, they have the top part that is sculptured out about the size of an automobile. They have the top part cut off where a person can sit inside of it. To meditate perhaps, or to make believe they are flying a Vimana because they are familiar with that. That is in their culture. That's in their society. In America, NASA, going back 20, 30 years ago, were quite interested in hiring scientists, craftsmen, technicians from India because that is in their DNA, the flying craft, spaceships. So bring them into NASA and help the American people to become more proficient in their building of spacecraft. Now, time travel. This is something I'm familiar with. I'm putting this under fact or fiction. Everything I've said to you so far is shared with you so far has been fact. And fact or fiction is, okay. I get carried away, Angelina. I do apologize, dear. Please bring up slide number 5. Is that 5? I can't read my own handwriting. The Philadelphia experiment. Oh, the Philadelphia experiment. I heard about that Mickey Mouse thing. Well, perhaps it is Mickey Mouse, perhaps it isn't, but people have done enormous amounts of research into it. Supposedly, on October 28, 1947, the USS Eldridge, E-L-D-R-I-D-G-E, was part of the US Eldridge experiment to teleport the ship with the crew from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia Naval Yard. And that supposedly was done on October 28, 1947. So I bring this to your attention. Is it fact, is it fiction? But this is perhaps to open you up to further insight and further discovery. Please, let's go to, Angelina, please go to slide number 6, which is the Montauk Project. Coming from New York and working in Queens, I worked out in Long Island many times. I'm familiar with the area, Montauk, Long Island. Long Island is approximately 90 miles long, but Montauk Project is about 90 miles long, and it's a very, very thin peninsula. And lo and behold, guess what is at the end of the peninsula? But a Navy base. Wow, interesting. Here was the military to teleport from military base from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia. Now here we have Montauk Point in Long Island with the Montauk Air Force Base called Camp Hero. I hesitate to have you really look into this because it's rather infamous with the treatment of human beings in their experiments to send them off into time, to travel into time, because they didn't come back. In fact, if they were put into the infamous Montauk chair to do time travel, they just didn't come back. They also used electromagnetic devices to enhance the psychic powers of people who sat in the Montauk chair. So this is a rather interesting subject to follow, but is it fact, is it fiction? Now, the next one I ask for Angelina to please bring up would be slide number 7. And here we go into remote viewing. This, ladies and gentlemen, is fact. I am intimate with this, and so is my dear wife, Fran, because in Connecticut, I did have a UFO abductee support group that I chaired for 3 years and 10 months. We met once a month privately in a private room in a restaurant just outside Hartford, Connecticut. One of the women there that my wife and I became very friendly with, and her husband also, she was quite psychic, was an artist, and she worked part-time being an artist. And she became enamored with the aspect of becoming a remote viewer. And she went for her training, and she became certified, and she put out the word through the standard methodology of that day of getting a job as a remote viewer. And she was hired by a corporation in Japan. What is needed for remote viewing? You don't have to be psychic. You don't have to be an artist, although being an artist is helpful because you are asked to draw what you saw. But 2 simple things are needed, and it's given to you, is the longitude and latitude. They don't want to influence you because we're gonna send Bill Winkler to the Pentagon today. No, they say, Winkler, Schminkler, look, here's the longitude, here's the latitude, and off I go. I have no idea I'm going. But let's say, for example, they do send me to the Pentagon, to a particular room. And then they ask me, what do you see? What can you read? What books are there? What books are on the shelves? Who was in the room? What paintings on the wall? So this is remote viewing. This remote viewing was enhanced, I think, let me just think back now, I used to say about 35 years ago, 4 years ago, with the United States Army's Stargate program. Here we go once again with the military. The Stargate program did remote viewing training. And how did they train someone? If they wanted to send some human being mentally, spiritually, from America to, shall we say, to Russia during the Cold War, to the Kremlin, they would have that person dress in white. Just visualize a scuba diver wearing his swimming outfit, he's all black. These people were dressed in white. They even had white goggles on, so you couldn't even see their eyes, because they were going to go into the Kremlin, into their espionage center, into their dungeons. And this is remote viewing that was done by the United States Army. After a while, they claimed, oh, this stuff doesn't work. And they claimed, we have disbanded it, but they never did. Okay, let's see now. Here we go. Coming down the finish line here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, remote viewing to the future. Can I just take a look once again to see? I think I saw Tiana's name here. I believe Tiana's on here. Past, present, and future. You can go into the future by doing remote viewing. The past, the present, and the future are intertwined. It's all going on at the same time. In my discussion last week with Tiana Galgano, who was one of my mentors, who was one of my hypnotists, who has helped me understand certain things about me. So dear Tiana, I now share with everybody, including yourself, dear. The psychic messages I get come in 4 words, once and only once. That's it. Loud and clear, so the same voice, male or female, I can't tell. As a teenager growing up, I had a message, 2 messages, 2 distinct messages coming to me, time after time after time, 3 or 4 years, 5 years. One of them was my tapping. I was always tapping my fingernails and my thumbs on the kitchen table, made of metal. The Europeans didn't buy anything flimsy. They bought something that would last 1,000 years. And the kitchen table was steel. I would hear quite distinctly, you'll be doing this. Most of my messages come with a contraction. In this instance, you'll be doing this. All right, come on, get off my back. I don't play a piano. I'm not interested in music. I'm tone deaf. I can't even sing God Bless America. What's this all about? You'll be doing this. Shazam! 15, 20 years later, where am I working? But in the Connecticut courthouse as a court reporter. And what am I working on? But a stenotype machine with the fingers going and the thumbs going. So that was in the future. But there was something else that was in the future. Indicated before that the Greenpoint section of Brooklyn, New York was European. And my inner conclave of the European conclave was Hungarian. Hungarian dances, Hungarian picnics, Hungarian funerals, and of course, Hungarian girls. Go to dances, go to picnics, whatever. You will marry Sicilian. I said, really? I don't know anybody Sicilian. Come on. There's a lot of nice Hungarian girls out here. I'm not going to marry somebody else. Come on. You will marry Sicilian. Well, 15 years later, what happens? I wind up marrying my dear Francesca, who is Sicilian. The past, the life, and the future are intertwined. The future was out there. I just had to go trudging through Brooklyn into Queens and then to Connecticut and come out here and, all this business. So I'm losing my train of thought. Gotta stay in focus. Stay in character, as they say in Hollywood. As we said in the Damon Runyon Theater, Winkler, stay in character. Stop fooling around all the time. Or you can kick you off the stage. The future's out there.
Simultaneous.
I beg your pardon?
Simultaneous.
Oh, yes, the future's out. As Deanna was sharing with me, and she instilled something I knew, I knew about this, but the future, the past, the present, the future is all intertwined, and it's all been worked out. And so, my suggestion, my request now is, my first request is, I'd like to address those, obviously all of you, but those of you in the group who are hypnotists, who are regressionists, who are past life regressionists, to develop a protocol for future life progression sessions, either an individual or in a group. As indicated before, I've been through about 20, no, easily a dozen past life regressions in a group in Connecticut. It's done very easily, and everyone gets off. It's like being on a bus. You get off at different stops. Somebody gets off at 1776. Somebody gets off, as I did, 8000 BC, and someone gets off in the Roaring 20s in Europe, for example. So this can be accomplished very easily, and it's fun too to share that information. But I ask you, psychics, you metaphysicians who are hypnotists, who are past life regressionists, to develop a protocol for future life progression. The governments are doing it. Corporations are doing it. Why can't we do it? Let's find out what's going to happen. All it is needed, obviously, in addition to longitude and latitude, is a date. Pick a date. January 1st, 2050. Let's see where America will be at that time. Let's see where the world will be at that time. And let me see now. Yeah, I guess I am just about concluded. I'd like to call upon Angelina one more time to bring up a slide, which is slide number 8. And it's metaphysics on my poetry there. And poetry, my poems, anyhow, as most poems, I guess, have messaging in it. But if you want to go to my website, billwinklerpoetry.com/, I'll display that in a second. But here's several of my posts that I've put in the past year or so. Singularity and duality. Next one is reincarnation in continual juxtaposition. Ooh, what could that be all about? And then this has got to happen. This is going to happen someday, perhaps in a lifetime of younger people. Humankind's first clone recall. I enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy being here today. I enjoy sharing. What I don't enjoy, I just shared this recently with Marcia. I don't enjoy answering questions. I've never have. I've given UFO presentations. I'm on a stage. Okay, folks, thanks a lot for coming. And I disappear and I go away. So please be gentle with me and go slow with your questions. And say again? Oh, yes. Okay, for those, this is unique. For those of you who are visible, because many of you are hiding behind a black screen, just please raise your hand and I will attempt to be as coherent and succinct as possible if you have a question about what I talked about today.